In a whirlwind, crazy, unprecedented 2020, gamers have been kept sane thanks to the hope and the expectation that Cyberpunk 2077 was coming this year. I've touched on this in previous Cyberpunk videos, but I've got a growing concern when it comes to this game's RPG credentials. I'm not here to say that Cyberpunk's going to be a bad game. I think it's going to be a fantastic game in many different ways. But is it going to be more dumbed down than a game like The Witcher 3 or many other RPGs? Are CD Projekt Red simply going to chase the mainstream crowd, or are they going to give us a hardcore RPG experience that we remember for years to come? Let's take a look. Hi, Estelden here. First things first, there's a brand new live-action trailer for Cyberpunk, and yeah, look, it's a little bit cheesy, but I still think it's cool. Keanu Reeves is one of those rare people basically everyone seems to like, so seeing him in this trailer, it's pretty nifty. I really like it. It's hard to believe after all the waiting that the game's only a month or so away, so very soon we're going to see if it's all been worth it. But I'll tell you that in a world where RPGs seem to always be dumbed down, I worry that this is going to be no different. CD Projekt Red are a trusted developer, and until they genuinely stuff up, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But what I've seen with Cyberpunk's marketing along with some of the dev videos, it really does concern me. And for those who are 100% confident this is going to be a pure RPG experience, I want to point to something that anyone can go and look at and see with their own two eyes. If we go back a little while ago, Cyberpunk was being advertised on CD Projekt Red's YouTube page as being a narrative-driven open-world RPG. However, when their marketing really picked up, it seems to have all been rebranded as an open-world action-adventure story. I want to jump in now and mention that I'm not suggesting this isn't going to have any RPG elements, it's absolutely going to. You're certainly going to be making some choices, you're going to be creating a character, that's all still happening, but this is about them dumbing this down and making it more of an action game, which may go against what fans were hoping for and what they feel they were sold by CD Projekt Red. An important question to address though is, what is an RPG? I'm not trying to be super elitist here and trying to say, oh, it needs to have so-and-so amount of stats. If I can't join minimum 8 factions, it doesn't count. That's not a role-playing game. I swear, I'm not trying to do that. This is more about the vision of the game and whether or not the developers are trying to create it with the RPG experience in mind, or if they see those elements as something that needs to be included because of the fact that the original Cyberpunk is a pen and paper role-playing game, if that's their motivation there. To make what I'm saying crystal clear to everyone, take a look at Fallout New Vegas. Great game, incredible RPG in many ways, and then go and look at Fallout 4. Now objectively, we can call both of those RPGs, but I think it'd be disingenuous to say that Fallout 4 is just as much of an RPG. Sure, you make choices, you do pick some stats, some perks, but it honestly felt like Doom Eternal in an open world for a fair chunk. It is not an RPG in the same way that earlier Fallouts were. I do believe that I'm acting in good faith when I say that. So that's my concern with Cyberpunk. Is it going to be Fallout 4 in comparison to other RPGs, or even Witcher 3 in some ways? That to me would be a major disappointment. I do think Fallout 4 entered with a lot of the same hype. You go here on YouTube, you read articles, everyone was giving it a 10 out of 10. Thank you very much, best Fallout ever. But time went on and people realised they'd experienced something that was quite hollow. It was quite a bit worse than previous games. And if Cyberpunk is going the same way, and I'm worried it might, I can see the same thing happening. People play it, they run over a few people in the car, they shoot up a few bandits, they ensure their character's got a 10-inch cock, and they'll have a bit of fun with it. It'll explode all over the internet. But then the people who loved Witcher 3 loved the choices offered and found it to be an extremely rich experience. Those people, they might walk away at the end of the year feeling like something was missing, that it wasn't quite right in the RPG department, it fell a bit short. There's a number of documented features that have been removed or dumbed down in some way. Originally you were meant to choose your own background, your childhood hero, and your reason for going out into Night City. But that's all been replaced by life paths, which is simply 3 different opening chapters. If we look at character creation year on year, it's been greatly reduced in scope. And most of the dialogue I've seen recently has shown 1 or 2 options, which just doesn't give me great hope for New Vegas level of choice. I'm deeply worried that CD Projekt Red are biting off more than they can chew, which is part of why the RPG elements have suffered. In Cyberpunk, you've got all of these vehicles at your disposal. It's a bit like GTA, you've got multiple cars you can buy, or you can even steal them. You've got the Archer, the Rayfield, or even a motorcycle like the Jaeger. In Witcher 3, you had Roach. That was it. So already you've got far more development to account for. You've got the driving physics, not just for one vehicle, but for multiple, and all the problems that come with it, such as the AI on the road and all the craziness going on there. How does that side of the experience work into the role-playing? I don't think it does. Car customization, it's no longer in the game. It may not have technically ever been in, but it was definitely discussed and it's not going to be included. So I really think we can expect a Watch Dogs or GTA-like experience there. Then you've got the huge amount of weaponry options on top of all that. In Witcher 3, you just had your swords and you might have had the crossbow, whilst this time you've got your submachine guns, you've got the pistols, light, medium, heavy. I could go on, and I will. Sniper rifles, explosives, but you get the point. There is a lot here. When this much development time has gone into the driving, you've had all of this work done on the gunplay and all the weapons, it does make me question then how much of the time spent in the game is going to be devoted to RPG-related affairs. Because the combat, from what I'm seeing, it's very much going to be action-based. So you're cruising around in the car, you're doing all this shooting, where is the depth going to be beyond that in perhaps the narrative department? Obviously, we've seen trailers showing some of the RPG stuff, and that's great, absolutely, but it reminds me a little of Fallout 4, where if you took out the very best bits, such as choosing a faction late in the game, or even just the initial period where you leave the vault and you get access to a couple of quests that do have some choice and consequence, it probably wouldn't look that bad. Is that going to be the case here? Will we get a main story that has a few key moments, but then the vast majority of side quests are going to be more shooter focused, and that's going to be the gameplay loop? That seems entirely possible given the large amount of resources that have gone into all the gunplay and the driving. Do we realistically think that a heavily marketed Keanu Reeves-led game is going to have a ton of options in it, and that enables you to stealth and hack your way through most portions of the game? I do question that. I don't think a game that's this expensive in 2020 is going to let us do all of those niche things. We'll do some of it, but I do think they will tailor the game around the casual experience, and that means mandatory explosions and all of that action. Now remember that the only reason I'm concerned and I'm bringing these things up is this is meant to be a proper RPG, influenced by a pen and paper series. It's not meant to be a complete action RPG for the most part, and that distinction is important. It's technically meant to be more advanced than The Witcher 3, and I'm just really not seeing it. The problem is, I think that most people hyped about this, and I'm talking about the core fans, people like us who watch videos on the topic, we browse forums, we're checking what the latest updates are. We're the ones who care more about the conversations in this game, the character development, the quest outcomes, and the choices. That's what we care about, but most of the latest marketing doesn't really show any of that off. It's more about the zany city and blowing things up. Looking at the marketing, along with the driving, the gunplay, all of this development time and all of these action elements, I really just don't think that there's like a hidden 50% that's all gone into the narrative, branching choices, all of these dialogue options. I think we might be deluding ourselves into thinking it's really going to be that deep on that side of it. The multiplayer aspect of the game certainly concerns me as well. It's a separate product, likely coming in 2022, but where my worry lies is that a lot of what we're seeing in this game has been done to set themselves up for the multiplayer portion. The RPG elements in this game, particularly the narrative side, they're not going to work in multiplayer. All that's going to go. What is going to work though is all those shooting mechanics, all the driving, and that will transition fantastically over to the multiplayer version of the game. So if CD Projekt Red are being smart and business-minded, which I will admit doesn't always line up with me wanting games with integrity and a great role-playing experience, does that then mean they're going to prioritise those elements of the game they want to get spot on because they're going to make up the bread and butter of what's going into their big multiplayer cash cow in a couple of years' time? I think we'd be silly to ignore that possibility because it does line up from a practical point of view. If I had to guess what I think this game's going to be when it comes out, I think it's going to have a main story with a lot of big set-piecey moments. It's going to have some choice along the way, absolutely, but I do think a lot of the side content, that's going to expand on a lot of the action gameplay decisions they've come up with, and it's going to focus on that area. I believe a lot of the choices within the game, that's all going to focus on the cosmetic side rather than the gameplay side. Given balancing all of these different gameplay options, that's just going to be too difficult. And once all is said and done, we'll look at this game probably as a high-quality action game with some of the RPG elements. That's my prediction. We're not going to look at it and go, yep, that's an RPG, that's one of the best. More of an action-style game. If I was being more optimistic though and anything was possible, then I would hope for an open world Deus Ex style game in this, and I'm not ruling that out by the way. I'd love to be completely wrong and to play this and find out that it's actually a hardcore RPG despite being in the AAA industry, and that would be fantastic. I don't think it's going to happen, but I could absolutely dream. I would love to be able to have a pure stealth focus to really master hacking, kill any quest giver NPC I want, and really shake things up, but I just don't think we're quite there. Finally, I want to touch on some big news that went around yesterday about CD Projekt Red's mandatory crunch. What I'll say is that the devs working 6 more Saturdays until launch, I don't think it's the end of the world, and I think a lot of people talking this up as being like the end of workers' rights, they're taking it a bit far, and I do think the meaning of crunch has kind of changed somewhat. I don't know about you, but I used to see it as when developers were pretty much being forced to work huge 15, 16-hour days, and most of it was not paid in full, which is what Anthem's development sounded like. This seems to me more like Jason Schreier trying to insert himself into a big controversy that simply isn't there, and I'll be honest, the guy's a bit of a hypocrite. He used to work at Kotaku and he would talk about how he hated capitalism and that money was getting in the way of creativity. And now he works at Bloomberg, who are one of the worst organisations out there, and he did it all for money. I understand why, but I think he should be consistent, that's all. And I'm saying all of this in defence of CD Projekt Red, who I've just questioned throughout the video, so I hope you understand that I'm just trying to give a fair view, rather than fanboying or going against something for the sake of it, because I actually care about great games, great RPGs. And I just want to see the industry and the quality of RPGs improve across the board. I don't want dumbing down to become the norm. I want the pushback that Fallout 4 started to get after release. I want that to be present as well if Cyberpunk isn't the RPG that we were promised and initially pitched. I understand that there's a lot of people very excited for this game for many different reasons, and I don't really want to ruin it for them, but I'm purely looking at this from the RPG angle. It's a genre of games that I very much love. I know a lot of other people are very passionate about it as well, and I just felt that this was our chance. This was this genre's chance to really shine and have a pen and paper-like experience within the Cyberpunk world, so it'll be a shame if we lose all that for GTA-like elements. I did hesitate in making this video, but I thought I've got to give my true thoughts on what I think's kind of happening with the RPG genre, what's happening with Cyberpunk, but I still think at the end of the day, a lot of people, including myself, will probably still get a fair bit of enjoyment out of it. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.